Get ready to dive into the comic book realm where heroes rise and villains take the helm. We're here to dissect the stories and the art. On source material, we tear the panels apart.
The second part of our discussion of the full Alias series. And Mark, I know you said you were wanting to talk issue 10.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to hold off. We're going to do that next episode. It ties in with the next one a lot better because J. Jonah Jameson is definitely featured in the underneath. So hold on to that. I know you're itching. Something to look forward to next episode. But this episode...
Yes, Daddy, I will obey.
This episode, things are going to get heavy. We are going to talk about issues 11 through 15, which was titled Come Home, Volume 2. This is Rebecca, Please Come Home is the first story of the second volume, which is issues 11 through 14. And then issue 15 is a story titled It's Raining Men. And I think you said you like that one anyway. You like that one anyway, so that'll be a nice little treat at the end of this. But, I mean, we're going to get kind of heavy here. We're talking Jessica Jones, Alias, Rebecca, Please Come Home.
Alias Volume 2, Rebecca, Please Come Home, Parts 1 through 4, Issues 11 through 14. Writer, Brian Michael Bendis. Artist, Michael Gaydos. Letterer, Richard Starkings. Colorist, Matthew Hollingsworth. Jessica arrives in Lago, New York, greeted by a sign pleading for the return of a missing girl, Rebecca Cross. Seeking Miller Street, Jessica discovers a newspaper announcing her investigation into Rebecca's disappearance. She meets Sheriff Sean, who directs her to the Cross residence. Rebecca's mother recounts the night Rebecca vanished, suspecting her husband of foul play. Jessica visits Edward Cross, who denies harming his daughter, giving her permission to search the house. Inside Rebecca's room, Jessica finds posters of superheroes and a stash of marijuana. Interrupted by Sean, Jessica admits her superpowers and plans to visit the high school next. At Lago High, she finds a death threat in Rebecca's locker, learning from a student that Rebecca was rumored to be a mutant. Jessica learns Rebecca was labeled a mutant, a fact that stirs anti-mutant sentiment in the town. She tracks down Freddie Thompson, who started the rumor after Rebecca claimed her powers could kill him during a flirtation. Jessica refuses to share details with local journalist Patrice Pugawa, then reads Rebecca's collage books at Tom's bar with Sean. The night takes a turn when Rebecca's father confronts Jessica, accusing her of ruining his life. Sean calms him, and later, Jessica and Sean share a kiss. Drunk, Jessica dreams of her superhero past and a dark vision of Rebecca. The next morning, she wakes in a cell, released by Sean after he explains how drunk she became. Visiting the town's church, she overhears a preacher preparing an anti-mutant sermon, fueling her frustration. Jessica confronts the preacher over his hateful sermon. At a diner, she avoids Sean and fields a call from Scott Lang asking her out. Jessica reads anti-mutant hate mail at the Lago Observer with Patrice, who reveals Rebecca was not a mutant, just different. Jessica learns the town adores the preacher despite his bigotry and hears of a young boy beaten to death over mutant rumors. Visiting Edward Cross's home, Jessica finds him murdered. That evening, she watches as Sean coordinates the crime scene. He points out a teenage bystander, prompting Jessica to ask about Rebecca's whereabouts. Jessica finds Rebecca performing at a bar in a neighboring town. After the show, Jessica drags Rebecca out, and during the drive back to Lago, Rebecca expresses her disdain for the town's bigotry. Their conversation is interrupted by a call from Matt Murdock, who wants to meet Jessica the next day. Back in Lago, Rebecca's mother slaps and berates her, blaming her for Edward's death. Rebecca flees, and Jessica finds her in the church bell tower. They discuss the harsh realities of their lives before Jessica offers to drive Rebecca back to her girlfriend. Jessica meets Sean, who confirms Rebecca's aunt admitted to killing Edward. After returning Rebecca's collage books to Sean, Jessica leaves Lago. On the drive back to New York City, she calls Scott Lang, asking him to keep her company.
So Jessica arrives in Lago, New York. Am I saying that right?
Sure.
Okay. And she's there to investigate the disappearance of a young lady by the name of Rebecca Cross. Now, Rebecca's mother suspects her husband possibly has a hand in her daughter's disappearance or potential murder. Now, Jessica does some investigation. This is a small town, by the way. There's some rumors that were going around that Rebecca was a mutant. And, well, sure enough.
Okay, I have to stop you. So Jonas and I were joking the other day about like making horror movies, and the first one, like the killer kills a house full of family during a holiday. The second one, this was my way of handling, my passive aggressive way of handling my frustrations with the office I work in. So I have a shared office space with, at any given time, there's 6 or 7, mostly women, mostly African American women. And I was like, that's where we're going to set the second horror movie, as our killer just one by one kills these women. But it wasn't just that. I was making fun of like their speech patterns where they all have to question what it was the other person said every single time. So it's like, Jesse went to the store. Jesse went to the store? Look, I didn't say it in any other way that could be misinterpreted. And it's like Jesse went to the store. Jesse went to the store. Like they couldn't believe you went to the store.
Oh my gosh!
Thing that happens, and it just goes on. It's like being in a Broadway musical, and I'm trapped in hell as they all repeat each other and say the same thing. Not a single one of them has an inner monologue.
Oh my!
It's just like by the end of the day, I'm gonna take her act myself just for the quiet.
Get me the hell out.
I bring that up not to be mildly racist, but also because this is an unpublishable episode.
Source material max. All right.
Because the way that some of the dialogue is written in this particular story, they're constantly like repeating each other in almost like a sing-songy fashion. Rebecca was a mutant. She was a mutant. She was a mutant. Ugh.
Yep.
Can you imagine Refn directing this episode?
Oh my gosh.
Show. She was a mutant. She was a mutant.
Fucking Refn.
I'm
having like bad flashbacks. bad flashbacks.
I want him to stop.
It was really uncomfortable. The pauses were ridiculous.
So anyway, not to be all Robert Winfrey about it, but my point is a lot of the dialogue in this one, not that it's bad, but there's a lot of repetition in it.
Oh, there is.
I think that's also why I didn't like the B-level story either, because there was a lot of repetition in that one as well with fake Rick Jones, kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again. It just drove me up the wall, and I needed to point that out.
So, and if you pay attention through these books and you look, you probably already saw, but Gaydos is also no slouch in just taking the same panel and pasting it and pasting it and pasting it.
Didn't bother me. That's good. I can go faster.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's not much changing in some of these panels. You're just reading the dialogue that goes along with it, and that's really the
entire page of Jessica Jones' mashed potato face.
Low effort, the comic. Appreciate what we get in here from Michael Gaydos, that's for sure. But yeah, the repetition, it's not just in the dialogue, it's in the art as well sometimes. Yeah. All right. So yeah, Mark, you know all about small town hijinks and small town prejudices, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is what I go back to. This is what you're setting me up for. I'll just go ahead and be on it. We already live in a world where there's prejudices. Even if there isn't out and out racism, there is racial preference. Some people are just like, I'm perfectly fine with other people that are not my race, my religion, my gender, having all the rights afforded to them as an American citizen, just don't live next door to me. Mm-hmm. And I've just come to accept that about this country. You can call us a melting pot, but we are very tribal. And it's when in doubt, find a scapegoat. Oh, yeah. Worked great for President Trump. It's a tried and true method of taking the attention off the real problem and focusing on something that's utterly bullshit. When you're in a place of everything is kind of going tits up and you need someone to blame because God forbid you blame yourself and take responsibility for your own actions, it's easy to point at the other and say it's their fault. Tried and true going on since the birth of Christ, at the very least. So in a world where superheroes exist, yeah, why wouldn't the people in small town buttfuck McGee decide all the problems in the world are because of mutants? My favorite characters in this entire story was the preacher, who's writing an entire sermon saying that this is the one time I didn't mind the repetition, so he's practicing his sermon, and he was like, mutants are the result of man's greed, which in no way tracks with reality.
So what are we doing here?
We're both comic book readers, and what were mutants? They were quote unquote children of the atom. They were the result of like nuclear radiation and the evolution of humanity. It's mutants were a genetic thing. It's like being born with like sickle cell anemia, only you get ice powers.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. They say like when I got diagnosed with lymphoma, and I was like, well, what's lymphoma? I'm like, it's a blood cancer. Well, how did I get it? You were born with it. And for some people, it just stays dormant, and in you, it woke up and tried to kill you. Like, oh, terrific. So
Shit.
sometimes you lose the genetic lottery, sometimes you win. And that's the story of mutants. So there's no reason for him to say it's due to man's greed, but it makes for a great sermon. And so Jessica Jones, who's superhero adjacent and knows a mutant or two, is like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's just committed to this. And when she's questioning him on it, like, explain to me how. And it's like the Idiocracy scene where they're trying to explain Brondo. Brondo is Gatorade.
Yes, okay.
With Gatorade, because Brondo tells people Brondo has electrolytes, and that's what plants need. And when they're trying to explain, no, plants need water, and that's why there's a dust bowl, they're like, but Brondo has electrolytes, and that's what plants need. And they're just going in a circle. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Dude, Idiocracy is one of the greatest satires I've ever watched. And it's so fucking true. But that's what's kind of going on here. She's like, there was no man's greed that caused the existence of mutants. No, it's man's greed that did it. And we need to be aware of these things and embrace Jesus. And she's like, none of this logically tracks.
Right. There's no way you can connect the two.
Right. And she
in
just
any
fucking,
way.
because she's Jessica Jones, she fucking loses her mind with him and finally walks out of the church. And then afterwards, like, so you've met the Reverend.
Mm-hmm.
It's all great stuff. That was like my favorite part of the story.
Yeah, this is a story about high school as well, and the bullying that goes on there, and just the othering that happens to people for no good reason. I think at one point, Rebecca, when we finally find out that Rebecca is not dead, by the way, she ran away.
She didn't want to be in this one horse town anymore.
Right. And but we find out that she was just like leaning into it because she wanted to piss people off. She was sick of people talking about it. She was like, I think it was a boy she was kind of trying to get into a relationship with her, which she was not into boys, if I remember correctly. You can't tell if a person's a mutant unless they got blue skin or they've got powers or they've got electricity coming off of them.
But Purple Man wasn't a mutant, and his skin was
right. Yeah, you still don't even know then. But what I'm getting at is that, like, the same thing could be said about people who are gay, who are transgender, whatever.
Contrary to popular opinion, gay people aren't purple.
Yeah, that's fair. But this happens all the time at high schools and, of course, with small towns. Somebody gets branded with what they believe is a bad thing, and then they're just mistreated continually because the word has gotten out that Rebecca is a mutant. Well, because she told Josh that she's going to light him up with her mutant powers. While that was a lie, she was just trying to get him to stop.
Shut up, or my cousin, who's a professional wrestler, John Cena, will come to the school and beat the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Prove it.
Yeah.
He's busy.
Nobody's worried about proving anything
right.
here. They're just worried about, okay, this person is associated with something that we all hate, and therefore just because they mentioned that one thing or they could possibly be that thing, we need to hate them. And so it's a great story in the fact that, okay, it's looking at small town prejudices and what goes on there, and Jessica Jones coming out of the big city going into here trying to help somebody out, and the relationship with Rebecca and her mom. As we get to the end of the story, we find out that Edward, her dad, gets killed by her aunt. All because, again, a whirlwind of stuff. And now the aunt believes that he had to have done something to her and proceeds to like stab him to death or something like that. And
right.
This is all happening after Jessica Jones finds out that Rebecca's in a different town and is bringing her home. She's been hired to find her, bring her home. And now she's on her way home, and she finds out that as they get there, they find out that Edward Cross has been killed. But then the reuniting of Rebecca and her mother was just like, it was heartbreaking.
Sure.
Because Rebecca runs up to her mom and is like, I can't believe what's happened. And then her mom just turns around and slaps her in the face and says it's her fault.
Sure.
It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we got, of course, Jessica Jones investigating things, which is exactly what you're coming to this book for. The question that I had that I kind of wanted to throw out here to you, and I think it was a good one, because I was trying to come up with some questions on some of these. Talk to me about living in a big city versus living in a small town. What are the advantages of living in a big city versus living in a small town? Because you've lived in some pretty big cities your whole life. You ever lived in a small town?
I grew up in the suburbs of Long Island, which was the suburb of the big city.
Right.
But my little school district was one they fashioned out of the outskirts of other bigger school districts.
Okay.
So for Long Island people, I'm North Massapequa, but I'm also parts of Seaford, and I'm parts of Farmingdale, and I'm parts of Bethpage, I think. This Venn diagram that makes up the Plain Edge School District. And we were not a huge school. I knew everybody in my class.
Mm.
There's not a single person I didn't know. Was I friends with everybody? Oh, God, no. I wasn't. Jesus Christ, I didn't like most of them. But when I look back at my yearbook, I knew and at least had some degree of an association with every single person I graduated.
Okay. So
people who, like, their graduating class is like 1,000 people, and they just don't fucking know all 1,000 of them.
right. I was pretty much the same way. I mean, I could look at a yearbook and there's I probably know like 90% of the people you'd point to, but I probably had interactions with about 30 to 40 at the most.
I had something I can tell you about every single person I graduated.
Right.
I would say the biggest difference between the big city and like a small suburb, or a small town, I've never really been necessarily in a small town. I've always been on the shadow of a city somewhere. So like I've lived in Tampa for the last 20 years or so, but not in the city of Tampa. I've lived in Eastern Hillsborough County somewhere, Long Island, New York. I lived in the valley of Los Angeles, again, the suburbs. I've lived outside of the city in Miami-Dade County, and I live so far down south I might as well have been in fucking Cuba.
Huh.
So I was equidistant between Miami proper and Homestead.
Okay.
So here's what I was getting at. This is my geography of where I've lived.
No, you're fine. I'm getting a map together here later since we're recording this. That's going to be the YouTube thumbnail.
If you want to get lost and be anonymous, you can in a big city.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like when you were a kid, all right, because you weren't too far from the big city, right?
It's a 45-minute train ride by the single greatest piece of transportation in the history of mankind, the Long Island Railroad.
Yeah, you've shared with me some stories about going into the city and as a kid. Did it feel freeing? I mean, did you feel like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever, or did it have a better feel in the big city compared to where
going into the city because it was so busy? Once you got out of the mole country that was Penn Station, and you're right there in Midtown Manhattan. Penn Station shares the same piece of geography as Madison Square Garden. So it's right smack in the middle of the island of Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan. If you go all the way up into Harlem, it's less busy. If you go all the way down by South Street Seaport, it's less busy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in Midtown, when you're on Broadway, when you're in this really condensed area where the world is happening around you, I used to love it.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't live in New York City now. But I guess to try to link this back to the comic or whatever, you could just be yourself in New York City and no one gave a fuck. They were already too busy doing other stuff.
Exactly.
No one had time to mess with you,
right.
Unless they were a mugger. Or they were the Lost Tribes of Israel and you were white, and then they had some time on their hands to deal with you. But I just want to make sure you know we're glad all the people on the ferry are dead. I'm just trying to get to school.
Please.
And I find your rabble amusing. So, whatever. Everyone's got a place to be and a thing to do in New York City. They don't have time to be sitting here worrying about small town stuff.
Yeah. That's kind of what I got with Rebecca's story here, where she just wanted to get out and get lost. Yeah. And also not be noticed. Hey, I'm done with you guys calling me a mutant. I'm done with the sick way everybody hates.
Something under a microscope is involved in my business.
Right.
I want to go to a place where nobody knows my name. Like, and I get that. Like, God knows I've been there.
Yeah, and of course, acceptance too. I mean, you're least likely to be not accepted in a melting pot, a huge city where everybody's coming there. So all walks of life are there already.
Pat also talked about growing up in Sterling, West Virginia, where like they had a pizza place and like something else, and they're like, boom, big city. Like that was Sterling, West Virginia. And he talked about a radio DJ who just thought 3 Men and a Baby was like the height of culture, but didn't understand Mad Max. That kind of a thing. And he was like, look, there are always going to be people who are perfectly happy being able to work at the gas station and fill up their truck for free, but not all of us fit in that town, and we have to go find our people elsewhere. Like, Patton Oswalt was like, I couldn't wait to get out of Sterling, West Virginia, and he fucked off and he became Patton Oswalt.
Right.
But for every Patton Oswalt, there's 100 people perfectly willing to work at the gas station to fill up their tank for free, or work down to Piggly Wiggly or whatever. To your point, like, there's like 1 to 100 people who will not go with the flow. They don't feel like they fit in, and they have to go find a New York, a Houston, an LA, a Miami, a Tampa. They have to go where there's people where they can find their people.
That's really all I had for that story. We got one more story to cover here before the episode ends. But did you have any other thoughts? It was a pretty heavy story, and I liked it.
I want to talk about the cop and Jessica Jones. So Jessica Jones wants to get drunk and fuck. Who doesn't? And
she likes it a lot more than other people do.
So it's so funny to me that Brian Michael Bendis, being a guy very much centered in on the often not discussed sexual relationships between men and women, and he kind of threw a dart at it. And I need to point this out, because the guy was perfectly happy to bang Jessica Jones. The cop was. The cop was like, "Well, you seem like an attractive loose woman. And I enjoy a good lay."
Sure.
And it was like, "But I don't want anyone to know about this." Like, he said to her, like, "I'm not going to bring you home." And so she wakes up in a jail cell, and she's like, "Did you fucking arrest me?" And he's like, "Well, no, but I can't bring you home, you whore." And she's like, "Wait a minute, I'm good enough to fuck, but I'm not good enough for you to bring back to your apartment like a human?" And it's like, what a choice Jessica Jones now has to make in life. Act out on my sexual agency. I'm treated as an object. And if I don't get the satisfaction of sex, which is fun and enjoyable and a basic need humans have. This is why everyone annoyed me that didn't get the Barbie movie, because while it wasn't perfect, the rant that America Ferrera, I think her name was, goes on, where she was like, being a woman sucks. Every choice is bad. There's nothing rewarding about being a woman. Like, it's basically the whole premise of her rant. Like, if you choose to be a bitch, you're mistreated. If you choose to be obedient, life is unfulfilling. There's nothing in the middle. Everything sucks. And this is why women have to sleep all the time and men are up doing podcasts. Not that isn't what's exactly happening right now. Moaned at me. But that's my point. Like, so poor Jessica Jones is like, "Hey, you want to put it in me?" He was like, "I would like to put it in you." And then, like, "Okay, well, do we still get to be a human?" No. You sex doll.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
I read that a little bit differently. I thought maybe she got drunk and she started getting like crazy.
Falling her off the table.
The thing is that later on in these next books, she gets drunk and she runs into like fucking Luke Cage's fridge, puts a big ass dent in it. Like, I would not take her ass home because your apartment won't be standing afterwards. That's
we fucked so hard. My third floor walked up and gave a first floor. You whore!
I'm throwing you in the jail cell. You're staying here. She obviously had no idea how she got there. She was probably blackout drunk.
Drunk more than once.
Yeah, that was my interpretation.
But here's the thing: the only reason why I'm not like going along with what you're saying, like maybe I'm reading too much into it, is he actively said to her, "It's like,
oh yeah, he said that." I think that's a factor in it too.
Do you know I had to pull you off the ceiling of Coyote Ugly?
The term he used was like,
"I can't take you home."
Yeah.
Like he's got a wife at home or some shit. He's trying to keep this on the hush.
I remember he said something along the lines of like, I don't get into that too much. Who knows? It might have been something where she tried to put something right up into his.
I was okay to bang in the middle of the night, but you're not really my kind of gal. Like, again, how dehumanizing for this poor woman.
Yeah. All right, let's get into It's Raining Men.
Alias Volume 2. It's Raining Men, Issue 15. Writer, Brian Michael Bendis. Artist, Michael Gaydos. Letterer, Richard Starkings. Colorist, Matthew Hollingsworth. In It's Raining Men, Natasha Romanoff visits the law offices of Nelson and Murdoch, passing Jessica Jones and Luke Cage en route to Matt Murdoch's office. Jessica criticizes Cage's bodyguard skills, sparking an argument about their past sexual encounter and leading to Cage accusing her of being self-critical. They eventually reconcile, speculating about Murdoch's identity as Daredevil, and Cage asks Jessica out, but she declines. Later, Jessica has dinner with Scott Lang, who suggests she abstain from alcohol. Jessica brings up Scott's prison time, and he shares that it made him a better person. They discuss the challenges of superhero dating until Spider-Man and the Human Torch's pursuit of Dr. Octopus interrupts them. But they opt to return to their dinner instead.
Totally seems like the hot friend and the fat friend of the ugly friend relationship, where like Carol Danvers is an Avenger and she's like an Amazonian blonde bombshell, and there's this gnome that she's friends with.
Yeah.
That feels like their dynamic, because it felt very real to me. Here you have the very successful person, and here you have the ne'er-do-well. And the successful person's just like, oh, come on. Success is easy. Look at me. I've done it. I'm already special. Meanwhile, you're like a 6-foot-tall blonde entity when Jessica Jones is like a traumatized fucking brunette.
Mm-hmm.
And Carol, you can see why her and Tony Stark got into it in Civil War, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Carol is definitely written as somebody who very rarely thinks about what she's doing because she always feels like she's right.
Mm-hmm.
And who can tell her she's wrong? She'll hit you with cosmic rays into the fucking atmosphere.
Right.
But I think also the reverse is true, where she likes being friends with Jessica. She likes those moments she has with them because Jessica reminds her what it's like to be a person. She's been a god now for a while, and she has to sometimes be reminded this is what it's like to be people without god powers.
Mm-hmm.
So her meddling in Jessica Jones's love life and going, hey, Scott's a fairly normal guy who we all laugh at and don't take seriously. He'd be great for you. And I love that first date. Like, this is one of those magic moments in this comic book for me. Because that first date where Scott's like, hey, I heard you're a drunken whore. Maybe let's have a nice date and clean you up a bit. And again, Jessica Jones is like on that precipice. We're like, well, on the one hand, how dare you?
Right.
I have the right to be a drunken whore, and you have no right to tell me otherwise. You're not my father. On the other hand, why am I fighting so hard to be a drunken whore? These are not good things.
And there's this delicate balance that's definitely gets across in the dialogue between the two of like, hey, these two don't really exactly know each other. They're on their first date. I remember Scott going like, are you mad that I said that? And she's like, no, I'm not mad. And then by the end of the story, he's like, you were mad, weren't you? She's like, yeah, I was pretty pissed, but I got over it. But yeah, you can see this kind of like delicate social balance that these two are trying to, they're superheroes, but they're trying to sit down, they're trying to have a normal date, and Scott is definitely pressing like, let's try and keep this a normal date.
I don't take a book where two superheroes go on a date and act like people over baby Thanos or baby Darkseid any day of the week. If given a choice between Superboy punches the universe and Scott Lang shames Jessica Jones into not drinking on a first date, I'm taking the
You're
laugh
taking it.
every time. 10 out of 10 times.
I don't blame you. I do not blame
I like how they act like people. That's a first date that I could have been on. Many of us, not you, because you've been married since the age of 7.
I didn't realize I'd get younger during the same pod. No, I'm sorry. This is the next podcast, so I guess it fits. All right.
Oh, good. Okay, we're on track. But for most of us mortals, we have absolutely been on the date because the crazy ones are fun and the fun ones are crazy, but sometimes you need them to not be crazy and you're willing for them to be less fun because not every single date needs to end like Blind Date with Bruce Willis. Have you ever seen it?
Nope. Tell me.
Oh my God. So Bruce Willis in Blind Date, the whole thing, the setup is he goes on this blind date, but she's a lunatic.
Oh.
And she takes him on this up and down roller coaster where at the end of it, Bruce Willis looks like his character from Die Hard.
Is this Sybil Shepherd? It's not Sybil Shepherd. That's Moonlight.
But John LaRoquette's in it, and John LaRoquette's like, I'll kill you.
Oh, wow.
It's hilarious.
I appreciate John LaRoquette.
To dig into that one and throw it in a triple feature. Blind Date's fucking hilarious.
That's great.
But that's what it is. It's just like, I haven't watched it in so long, I don't totally remember how we get to her acting like a loon. But there's a thing where it's just like, oh, if I drink a little bit, I'm a little out of control. And he's like, oh, you'll be fine. Because a guy wants you to drink so that your social mores will drop and so will your panties. Tale is all this time.
Right.
And she's like, no, I really shouldn't. I get a little crazy. And like, so she has a few drinks because he's like, come on, be fun. And then she turned into like She-Hulk on meth. You know? And at the end of it, Bruce Willis looks like he does at the end of Die Hard.
Oh, wow.
Kim Basinger's in this movie.
Kim Basinger. Oh my! And this was what, mid '80s, late '80s, right?
1987.
Yeah.
Career-focused workaholic, Walter Davis is under pressure to deliver on a major project that will see his employers manage the vast assets of Japanese industrialist Yakamoto. Urgently needing a date for the dinner celebrating the deal, Walter's brother Ted offers him a blind date with his wife Susie's cousin Nadia. Ted and Susie warn Walter, do not let Nadia get drunk, and as she loses control. And lose control she does.
Oh, I didn't realize. I've heard of that movie. I've seen it sitting on the video shelf at the local Parmar VHS. I've never picked it up.
With Mindy, it's fun. Comedy was funny.
Yes. So, yep.
Drink every time I make a non-comic reference in the show. You will also be blacked out.
You will also lose control. So this is the start of something. I mean, this isn't just like a one-off date. These two are actually going to develop a little bit of a relationship as we go forward. So this is kind of the start of that. I love the end of it. I love the fact that we see Doc Ock with his mechanical arms going down the road. Yeah, and they're just like, should we join them? Nah, let's sit down. I'm hungry. Let's
I got this. It's totally me at work, by the way. Are you going to get involved in that? No, the deputy's got this as they dogpile on somebody. I don't need to get involved in this.
All right, there we go. That was issues 11 through 15 of Alias. We talked Rebecca, Please Come Home, and we also discussed It's Raining Men. So Mark, you got all right, we're getting out of here. Let's hit them with some plugs, Mark. What do you got to say?
All right, W2M Network is the webpage. W2M Network is the YouTube. Radulich and Broadcasting is the audio. At Mark Radulich, MarkRadulich, is the TikTok. And Mark Kind, MarkKind, like mankind, but Mark He. Mark Kind 76 is the Instagram.
All right, folks, I'm going to throw the canned plugs in here at the end. Check out @SourceMattCast on Twitter. We post most of our stuff over there. So we're getting out of here. That's Mark. I'm Jesse. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back at you here in a couple weeks. We're going to be discussing the third of our 4 discussions on Alias issues 1 through 28 next week. So thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.